It is officially spring football season. I'm Manny Navarro from The Athletic. He is Adam Lichtenstein of the South Florida Sun-Sentinel. It is Wednesday, March 25th, 2026, and we're officially into a new season. Adam, how did the last 48 hours sort of evolve in your mind? I look at it as this program's in a much different place than it was this time a year ago, right? Coming off a trip to the national championship, you have a pro day with hundreds of NFL personnel, all 32 teams there to watch you. I feel like Miami has officially arrived now. The Mario Cristobal era is a success, is the way I view it now.
I agree. The word that comes to mind, an SAT word that comes to mind is ebullient.
Oh, it's a good one.
Which, yeah, very high energy. Like I don't know, like the vibe is just. I think about like a couple of years ago. It's just so different now. I mean, obviously you have their incredible success last year, the playoff run that came. I don't want to say completely out of nowhere, but mostly out of nowhere. The fact that they're going to have at least two, I think, maybe up to. I mean, who knows after pro day, maybe 4 first-round picks even. It just kind of shows that this program is really in a totally different spot than it was, when Mario Cristobal got here a couple of years ago. They're the word. I mean, I think you can use it as momentum. Like the thing is really rolling downhill in a good way. They're on a roll right now.
They really are. We're going to hear from Mario. I've got some audio clips from his 17 minutes with us yesterday. I didn't get there in time to watch the first spring practice, so I didn't get to see all the bodies up close, but there's certainly a lot of video and a lot of impressions you can share with us as far as the way the 2026 roster is panning out. We're going to sort of hit on every single position group. I've got some graphics to show you for those of you wondering what number everybody's wearing, because I know that's a big deal this time of year, Adam. We'll talk a little bit about each of those position groups. We'll talk some recruiting. We'll talk about the NFL draft and what Keontae Scott was able to do for himself. But let's start with just day one impressions. What you saw. My feeling is, more than anything else, Adam, is this roster in terms of the way that it looks physically compared to when Mario arrived on December 2021. And the amount of work that has gone into making this an elite football team at every position with depth. I think we're finally there. I think last year when the season started, I felt like Miami was on the precipice of getting there. But now that you see this recruiting class, you see what was brought in through the transfer portal, I really don't see a weakness. I see an experience in some areas, but I don't really see like weaknesses.
Oh, I totally agree. The only position groups I would say I really have concerns with or questions about. I wouldn't even say concerns, questions are tight end, I guess, offensive line, and linebacker. Mm-hmm. And it's not a question of do they have the talent. The question is who's going to kind of emerge from those groups. I think there's plenty of talent at all of those positions. And I don't think those positions are going to be bad. It's just we have to see, we can't predict the future. We have to see what's going to happen. Like they're deep at basically every position. I look at, I'll tell you what, the place where things really stand out to me is wide receiver, because that room is, first of all, insanely deep. I mean, they've got probably 5 or 6 guys who could start, wide receiver. But in terms of like just body composition and size, I think about how they've got, they don't have short guys at wide receiver anymore. They have tall guys. And it's a simple way to look at things. But like I was looking in, it was Milan Paris and Tyron Evans, 2 freshmen, standing next to each other, and they're towering over guys. They're 6'4", 6'5", and they can move. You add Josh Moore into the mix, who I like a lot. He's a 6'4" kind of guy. Like they've got a lot of size in that room, and they didn't really have that a couple of years ago. They didn't really have that, 2 years ago when Cam Ward was the starter, and they had Xavier Restrepo and Jacoby George and Sam Brown and those guys. Like they didn't really have that size in the receiver room, and now it's like I feel like if you're a quarterback like Darian Menzo, why wouldn't you want to come play in this offense when you've got weapons? You got Malachi Tony, who's 5'11" or whatever, but obviously incredibly skilled, and you can throw to him, or you can throw to these 6'4" guys. Like they've got like everything. I feel like it's a really diverse team stocked with talent and stocked with the right body types kind of everywhere.
Yeah, I want us to listen to some Mario Cristobal audio here in a second, and I'm gonna put Mario here on the screen. But what from his 17 minutes with us yesterday grabbed you the most in terms of the way he is talking about this team and what he feels like the momentum this program has?
Well, in terms of like one of the things that really got my attention, talking about the offensive line, that's one of the things I think we're all going to be kind of locked in on this spring. Talked about experimenting at the offensive line, watching them. We don't get to see a lot of the offensive line because of where they position them on the fields and where they allow media to go. But the parts we did see, like they've got a lot of guys rotating at different positions. I think it's going to be like he said, a lot of experimenting all over the line. And then in terms of like just overall, he said he's felt like this program's had momentum dating back really to the end of their first year, which makes sense because that year, they end the season 5-7, they miss a bowl game, but then they start kind of getting that series of wins. They gotten a commitment from Francis Noah. They got a commitment late in the process from Ruben Bain, and they start kind of getting the ball rolling downhill. They start bringing in all this talent. The next year they get a little better. The year after that they get a lot better. And then the fourth year they get a lot better from there and make the playoffs and make a run to the title game. So that, it's kind of an overview kind of look at things. I think that stood out. Just like this ball kind of started rolling end of 2022, started 2023. And, a lot of people during that time had doubts about Mario Cristobal and what he could do with this program. And those doubts were not like entirely wrong. Like Mario Cristobal made mistakes. The most notable one being, of course, the Georgia Tech game.
Right.
But like he's not been perfect, but this thing has been going in the right direction for years now, and that paid off, this past winter.
All right, I'm going to play some of these audio clips in between our conversation. We'll start with Mario talking about momentum and where the program is headed.
I don't think momentum's ever stopped since like even year one going into year two and the way things ended, because I think everybody knows, people in the building, that the people that are here now and the work that we do is going to lead to continued progress. And so, yeah, they've been chomping at the bit to get out there. A little bit of a different model for the offseason because we played so late into the season. I believe it's almost 24, 25 straight weeks, which is different for Miami. So the guys that had over a certain amount of game reps, they were subjected to a different offseason, at least initially, until their bodies had reached a point where we could go. Because when we go, we go, and not in a reckless manner, but we're physical, we practice hard, and I think it's caught the attention of not only our players, but it's in the way we play, it shows. And I think yesterday's pro day was an indication of the fact that the NFL loves the way that the Miami Hurricanes play football. So all in all, just again, solid day. Looking forward to hopping on that film, getting these guys in here and getting better.
So those were Mario's thoughts on day one, and you mentioned the momentum and where they are as a program. We talked about the NFL Pro Day. Let's talk a little bit about Darian Mensah, because he's obviously the big arrival in terms of the transfer portal. First impressions of him throwing the football, what did you see?
I think they're going to invent a new draft position ahead of 1-1 just for him. No, I mean, like, we've seen Darian Mensah at the start of the last 2 years at Tulane and Duke. He's obviously a very talented quarterback. Nothing he's going to do in spring practice, good or bad, is going to, in my mind at least, outweigh what he's already accomplished on the field. But, getting 30 minutes to watch him yesterday, like, he's got zip on the ball. He puts the ball in tight windows, and I just think, it kind of further exemplified or proved what I already thought. It kind of confirmed what I already thought. He's a very good quarterback. He's going to fit well into this offense. I think there's a lot of talk comparing him to Cam Ward. I can kind of see it in terms of just like the zip he gets on the ball. The ball comes out of his hand, different than all the other quarterbacks in the room, which is the same way I felt about Cam Ward 2 years ago. You can see it, you can hear it. Like, he's just different than the other guys in the room. And I don't know. There's not much you can really see in 30 minutes that's going to outweigh what we already know about him.
Right, the results.
The results that we've already seen from him. But yeah, I just everyone we talked to, everyone got asked about him. Cristobal, the players we spoke to, got asked about him. They obviously had nothing but positive things to say about him. That he's a good leader. That he's very smart. He obviously is a playmaker at quarterback, like all good things. I don't think any of those things are wrong. Like I don't think they're lying to us. I think he's just a very good quarterback, and I think we'll see that throughout spring. And as long as he's healthy, like I think he could take the offense a long way.
Yeah, 34 touchdowns, I think 6 interceptions, half as many as Carson Beck, and obviously led a Duke team without the same type of offensive line Carson Beck had to an ACC championship, granted 5 losses, some of them to G6 programs, including Tulane, but still a phenomenal season for him after he made the transfer from Tulane to Duke. And I think he's without question one of the 10 best quarterbacks in college football. And look, that's what you need to win a championship. That's good enough in my book. Let's listen to what Mario had to say specifically about Darian Mensah.
A complete professional, ownership of the system, great command, personality, arm talent, escapability, pocket presence, accurate, knowledgeable, great energy about him as well. Just people gravitate to him, and he's, people are attracted to that kind of energy, and I think he's another galvanizing agent. We've been very fortunate in that regard over the past several years about the quarterback being someone who galvanizes people. But I think him, and then the return of guys like Mark Fletcher, Ahmad Moten, even though he's going to miss most of spring due to some stuff. I think all those guys, Monterey, they galvanize this unit, and I think Darian Mensah has fit in perfectly.
All right, he mentioned Moten being out. Seems to be the only major injury, right, in terms of guys that are going to be held out. Mario talked about it yesterday that we practice, right? We don't have any sacred cows that we're out here protecting, so to speak. And so that's good. That's a really good place. The one thing you have to acknowledge is that Miami was very fortunate last year in their run to the national title. I mean, you had offensive line health all the way through. Defensive line health, right? Ruben Bain, after what he battled through as a sophomore, to come back and have a full healthy season. Really, the only injury you had was Keontae Scott, right, where he missed those 3 weeks late in the season because of the injury, and he was able to come back in the playoffs and be a big part of it. So again, that's a big factor here for Miami when you think about where they are in the spring. Everybody's going to be able to come in and develop. You have some freshmen that did have surgery and I know are not out there. Because that's normal. It's usually what happens with the high school guys. But, Adam, maybe you can speak to that, just what it means for Miami to be as healthy as they are and maybe the amount of reps that all these guys can get together.
Yeah, I mean, something that astounds me, and I'm going to knock on wood very loudly, I don't think Miami's had an offensive line starter miss a game in 2 years.
Yeah.
I don't because Maui Noah played every game, Cooper played every game, Brockermeyer and Carpenter played every game in the last 2 years. McCoy and Okunlola were in there the whole time, and Markel. Oh, Jalen Rivers. That's who I'm forgetting. Jalen Rivers was banged up last year, but Markel Bell filled in very well, and he didn't miss a game this year. So they've been extremely fortunate again with that offensive line health. Like that's so crucial. You don't have to sub in guys, put in inexperienced guys or guys who aren't ready. That's huge. So obviously it's massive to get through a run like that without major injuries. I look to another team here in South Florida who I've covered a little bit, the Florida Panthers, who have basically played 4 seasons in 3 with their Stanley Cup runs the last couple of years. And this year, they've just been absolutely devastated by injuries.
Yeah.
Alexander Barkov, Matthew Tkachuk, Seth Jones. I mean, some of them are freak injuries. Some of them are soft tissue injuries. Like Barkov has been out the whole year with a torn ACL. That's what you get when you just add that extra wear and tear on guys' bodies. And I remember Cristobal said earlier, I think in the winter, must have been after the national title game, when they were doing winter conditioning and stuff, that the way they were planning on doing things was going to be different because they played so many extra snaps. I think he said like guys who play over 400 snaps, we're going to have an altered conditioning program. He mentioned it again yesterday. He said at least at the start, they're going to train a little bit differently to try to avoid those kind of injuries, avoid the wear and tear injuries that come from only having a limited time off. I mean, they were playing football 2 months ago. So they got basically 7.5, 8 weeks of off season, and that includes winter conditioning stuff as well. So like they got to ensure that guys are staying healthy. And for somebody like Ahmad Moten who got hurt in the playoff run and tried to play through it, like this spring, like what Ahmad Moten's going to do, and of course you want to see him develop and get better in spring camp. But if the other option is risking him, aggravating that injury or not recovering fully, you got to let him, recover and get ready for the season because he'll be back for fall camp, I assume. You got to let these guys kind of get healthy and get ready for the upcoming year.
100%. And one guy who is going to take advantage of every snap this spring is Jackson Cantwell, the number one offensive tackle in the country that Miami was more than happy to be able to corral and bring in as a quote-unquote Francis Mauigoa replacement. He was working some at left tackle, I think, yesterday. There's probably a chance that he's really going to be the right tackle, and they're, with the amount of cross training they do on the offensive line, we'll talk about that more later. But let's get to Mario and what he had to say specifically about Jackson Cantwell here.
Yeah, he was probably happy that Ruben and Mesidor weren't in there today. That was his baptism when he was here at the end of the season. Absolutely. And he's such a high level caliber athlete, but you still have to adjust to this level of speed, power, and everything else that goes with it. And he's a sponge, and he attacks his dailies like a professional as well. So, and you've seen him. I mean, he's massive. 6'8" plus. I don't know what he weighs, but it's a lot. But it's the right kind of weight. I think you guys are very familiar with Coach Mirabal and his regiment, the way he trains guys, and the mentorship of a Matt McCoy, of a Ryan Rodriguez, of a Samson Okunlola. That is priceless right now. And those are guys, and I know we lose starters, but those guys are all co-starters or have started. So all in all, I think it's just a great situation for him and some of these other young offensive linemen.
How am I doing, by the way, flipping between audio clips? Does this look like a real show? Are we
yeah,
doing a real show, Adam?
Killing it.
I'm trying. What were your impressions of Cantwell? Because obviously, baptism by fire, right? When he first got here in January, he's having to go up against Ruben and Bain and Mesidor and getting completely embarrassed, is what I was told. He was basically getting schooled by those guys. How do you think he's adjusting? What have you heard through the grapevine?
Yeah, I mean, if he couldn't come in as a fresh off a high school season and defend 2 first-round picks or block 2 first-round picks, he's bust. Like, who cares? No, but he, first of all, I mean, the first impression I have of him is that he's huge. He's a massive, massive person. Kind of like thinking about him just in terms of like comparing him to Francis Mauigoa. Like, I think he's a little taller, maybe a little more not skinny, obviously, but like lithe. Maybe I'm pronouncing that word wrong. Kind of like a smaller frame. I think Francis Mauigoa is a little wider. But yeah, I mean, he's a huge guy. And the fact that he was able to get a lot of practice reps during the Hurricanes playoff run, it reminds me of, again, for those who might not know, it's Yankees opening day, so I'm a big Yankees fan. It reminds me of Derek Jeter. Because one thing with Derek Jeter is that he came up in 1995 when the Yankees, and basically sat on the bench most of the time while the Yankees went on a playoff run. And he got to sit there and absorb and learn and see how everyone kind of handled themselves. And and Cantwell similarly got to do that during the Hurricanes playoff run. And then Derek Jeter comes in the next year. He wins Rookie of the Year, has a great year, leads the Yankees to the World Series, and, the rest is history. Not saying Cantwell's going to come in and be, a superstar from day one, but I think it's going to help a lot that he got those reps against stars like Ruben Bain and Nakeem Mesidor, that he got to watch all these veterans do their thing and absorb what it means to be a college football player, before his first semester began. So I think that's huge. I think that's only going to help him. And, look, he's not going to be, a superstar the moment he walks on the field. And neither was Francis Mauigoa. Francis Mauigoa, when he started every game as a freshman, but he was not like a star offensive tackle. He was fine for a freshman. Like, he held his own, but he wasn't the Francis Mauigoa that we know now.
Yeah.
So I don't expect Jackson Cantwell to come in and be an All-American from the word go. He's still a freshman. He still spent the last 4 years playing high school football in Missouri. So he's not going to come in and just be this world beater at tackle, whether it's left tackle or right tackle. But I think this is going to be a crucial time for him to grow and learn through spring, through fall. And he's going to keep getting tested because Miami still, despite not having Ruben Bain and Nakeem Mesidor anymore, still has great pass rushers in Damon Wilson, in Marquise Lightfoot, Hayden Lowe, all these guys. Like, they're going to test him. And he's going to spend the next 8 or, however many months it is till August. I can't do math. 5 months or whatever. He'll spend the next 5 months learning and going against other good players. And you can only expect him to kind of learn and grow from there. I do expect him to start this season. So, we won't know for sure until he's going up against the Stanford defensive, pass rush. But I expect him to, to hold his own. I think he's going to grow a lot this offseason, and I think he'll hold his own.
Let's start our team breakdown with the offensive line, because I think that's really the biggest position, right, that we're all sort of looking at and saying, what are they going to be, right? What kind of unit are they honestly going to be? Here's the group, the 15 bodies that you have. You got Matthew McCoy, the one returning starter, and again, these numbers are just 20-25 starts and snaps. I figured this is the most pertinent information. He's moving from left guard to right tackle. I think that's a position McCoy can handle. At first, I had heard, left tackle, and maybe he still ends up there in the fall, but I think he's a good run blocker. I think that's really what he's known for. I think when you step outside and you've got to, deal with elite edge rushers, that's probably asking a little bit too much of him. We'll see ultimately whether he ends up on the right side or the left side, and Cantwell ends up on the left side, vice versa, however it ends up. But I think from a protection standpoint, I think McCoy is a solid guy to have back. I think Samson Okunlola playing at left guard, that's probably where he'll be, right? I mean, he did a really good job, I thought, last year at left guard when he filled in. And look, 493 snaps. I mean, that's basically being a starter, right? For a lot of other teams that only played 12 games, Miami played 16, and he played in every single one of them. So Ryan Rodriguez back at center, him or SJ Alifatul. One of those two guys will probably end up being the center, and then after that, it's anybody's guess, right? I think, where Miami goes. Does Max Buchanan end up being the right guard? Is it Jamal Merriweather, the transfer from Georgia? I think I've heard a lot of good things about Jaden Wilkerson and Demetrius Campbell and their development from year 1 to year 2. So it's a very interesting unit. All eyes will be on it, obviously, early in the season.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, like I said earlier, I think the talent to have a good offensive line is there in this group. It's just a question of who emerges. Whether it's Jamal Merriweather or Max Buchanan. Whether it's whether Jaden Wilkinson or Demetrius Campbell or one of those guys steps up. The talent's there. I think McCoy, like you said, I kind of like him a little bit better at guard. I think they're going to play him at tackle because he's got that experience and everything. But I think he could definitely be a capable tackle as well. So I think, like I said, all the pieces are there. And look, if you're going to trust anybody to build an offensive line, it's going to be Mario Cristobal and Alex Mirabal. Yeah. Those two guys can put together an offensive line. They can shape a line in the next 5 months. So I wouldn't say I'm concerned about it. It's just, we'll see how it kind of shakes out.
When you combine the 2024 and 2025 season, and I've got access to True Media, which is not a lot of people do as much as they wish, right, to have the access to those analytical sports stats, and they've got all kind of stuff. They combine PFF, they combined all the other stat and analytic sites together. Miami's offensive line in 24 and 25, lowest pressure rate combined in those two seasons. They were definitely number one last year by a wide margin, but even when you combine 24 with 25, they're number one. And I think they were 21st or something in 2024 in terms of pressure rate. So obviously those guys know what to do in terms of pass protection. And I had a scout, a buddy of mine who I know watched the entire first practice yesterday. He said to keep your eye on Ben Congdon, the 4-star offensive tackle from Ohio. Joel Irvin, who's from Fort Myers, another 4-star recruit, had surgery, so he's out this spring. But Congdon's a guy that I think is really impressive. At least the words of the scouts that I was told was that guy can play. So I'm not worried at all about Miami. I think they're going to have some early season learning moments. Certainly Darian Mensah's more elusive at the quarterback position to get away from guys than Carson Beck was. And I think that'll be a good thing, but I think this is going to be a very good unit.
And the good thing for Miami, I mean, you look at how they start the year. It's Stanford, Florida A&M, Wake Forest, Central Michigan in the first, month, which gives them, plenty of time to, go against, some two conference teams, but, not two dominant conference teams or anything. And a couple, non-conference games against, a G5 and an FCS team. That gives them a whole month basically to work out the kinks and get things kind of in order before, you face your first real test in Clemson. So they have time to work things out, and I think they'll make things work.
Mario, by the way, mentioned Reese Woodrow and J.J. Sparks, the two freshmen, as advanced arrivals. So again, right body types. They're going to just have to learn through some early season mistakes, and I think it'll be a good unit. Let's move on to the defensive side of the ball because defensive line, right? Ruben Bain, Akeem Mesidor are gone, and there's a lot of people that are nervous, like, oh man, are they going to be as good there? Should I be worried, Manny? Like, how bad are they going to be? Is this a huge drop off? I'm of the opinion that this might be an even better group, and that's maybe saying too much, right? I might be overplaying it for Miami purposes, but I just think the collection of talent that they've got on that side of the ball, especially through what they've done recruiting wise, it could potentially be better here. Adam, do you agree or disagree?
I don't know if I would go that far. I don't know if I would say
Okay.
it might be better. I don't think the drop off will be any. I don't think the drop off will be significant. I think the area I might be most concerned about, and I use that term very loosely. I'm not really concerned about it, but what I'm interested to watch is how the defensive line, how the edge rushers do against the run, because that was something I think was really unsung last year.
True.
Ruben Bain and Akeem Mesidor, in addition to being excellent pass rushers, were very, very, very good against the run. Two of the best, I think, defensive ends in the nation against playing the run. This year, you look at who's going to be potentially starting for at edge. It's Damon Wilson. It's Marquise Lightfoot, two fantastic pass rushers who I don't think are quite at the same level as Bain and Mesidor against the run. Now, I don't think that's going to be fatal to Miami or anything, but I think that's a place where things might get a little bit worse. The play I think that might stand out to me most for Ruben Bain all throughout that playoff run wasn't any of the times he got to the quarterback. It was that run defense he had against Ohio State where he just sheds the tackle and gets the running back in the backfield, despite being pushed all the way outside. So that's kind of a question I have. Again, it's a question, more of a question, less of a concern. So okay. I think they're, again, capable of handling all that. I think they still have very talented defensive ends, but that's a question mark that I have kind of entering the season. How they kind of handle the run defense on the defensive line.
More than fair. I would say this. I think Justin Scott and Ahmad Moten together, a full season together, could be better than what Miami had last year, right? When David Blay was sort of in the mix for half the season. I feel like Justin Scott going into his third year, I think this is a guy that's ready to really peak and play at an elite level. I mean, former 5-star guy. We know the talent is there. You saw it during the second half of last season. Moten I thought was absolutely solid. Yes, he's coming off of injury, but he is excellent. I mean, excellent run stuffer. This might be the best tandem Miami's had at defensive tackle in decades in terms of just two legitimate guys that I think are NFL players. Wilson, I think, is an NFL edge rusher. Keona Davis is coming in as the third D tackle, fourth D tackle potentially if you put Armando Blunt, kind of in between playing both D tackle and end. That's why I think they're going to be better. I think when you are elite at the defensive tackle position, as good as you are on the edge, or as good as they were on the edge last season, that can really elevate, especially when you have a bunch of guys that you're going to be rotating on the edge, right? And we've heard great things, obviously, about Lightfoot. We've heard great things about Scroggins. Really, the guy that everybody keeps telling me is going to be an absolute beast is Hayden Lowe. And he didn't play a single snap last year because of injury. So that's just guys returning, right? And brought in through the portal. Keyshawn Stansel, I mean, everything I'm hearing about him, they're like, this dude could start day one. That's the kind of talent he has. So, again, I think as great as they were last year with Ruben Bain and Mesidor, I think there were times when it felt like they had to do a lot of the heavy lifting. I think you can spread some of this responsibility. And we talked about injuries earlier. If there are injuries, I think Miami can survive it because this group is much deeper than the first couple ones that Mario put together.
Yeah, I think that's totally fair. I definitely agree with you at defensive tackle. I loved what I saw from Moten throughout last year. I think he was a huge part of that defensive line. I mean, if you remember looking back at the Ole Miss game, he gets hurt, and what happens on the next drive? Yep. They pop up. Lacey pops off that run, a touchdown run. Mm-hmm. I think he's a huge part of that defensive line. As long as he's healthy, he's going to be just a key cog, a really unsung dude. I think he's going to start getting some shine after his playoff performance and his play last year. Like you said, Scott, liked him a lot as a player. Like you said, should be coming into his own now and entering his third year. Davis, I think, is going to be a very crucial player. Barring any injuries, obviously, he should be probably the third that rotational defensive tackle who comes in, plays 20 plus snaps a game. If that guy for you is a solid player, that's such a boon for your team, for any team, to
Yeah.
have 3 good defensive tackles, a guy who can rotate in and play, and there's no drop off. That's obviously huge. Like you said, Hayden Lowe. I remember last year he was getting kind of the Ruben Bain treatment in spring. Like, this dude's a monster. That all the coaches and players were talking him up, and then obviously he gets hurt, misses the whole year. So very excited to see what he can do. A guy I'm kind of interested in, I haven't really heard much about him, is Jarquez Carter, because he was a guy Miami wanted out of high school. He goes to Ohio State, doesn't really play much. I don't know a ton about him yet, so I'm very intrigued by him. But if they can get some production out of him, if he can be whether it's a fourth or even fifth defensive tackle with between Scott, Moten, Davis, Keyshawn Stansel, and him, like, that's, again, the more depth you have, the more quality depth you have. You can rotate guys in and out. That's I can't even state how important that is. If you plan on going on a 15, 16 game run throughout the year, you need that depth. So I think he could be an interesting piece for this defensive line if he kind of lives up to the prospect ranking he had coming out of high school. For
sure. And obviously Corey Heatherman's second season for a lot of these guys, right? Like, they're going to be sharper. The communication is going to be sharper. You can expect that they're just going to elevate their game. And look, really, one of the questions you asked yesterday, we can touch on this briefly, is the three assistant coaching changes. I guess tight ends, right? Cornerback, which still hasn't been hired, and then running backs, right? Those are the three spots. Defensively, you're basically intact. In terms of the staff, one change only. What did you think of in terms of the moves that Mario made and who he hired?
Really interesting moves, because I don't know. I didn't really have like any expected people I thought they'd bring in, but they bring in Fabian Upshaw, who spent the last couple of years in the NFL, who doesn't really have a ton of coaching experience. I think he coached at like the G5 level off the top of my head. And like I said, spent a couple of years as an analyst, not even a full-time staff or like a full, position coach in the NFL. They bring him in to be the running backs coach. So I find that very interesting. And then Mike Vitti, they bring in from Army, who he had been in Army for
War hero.
a decade. A war hero. Yeah. Like, I mean, he served in, I think, Afghanistan. So they bring, he was a player at Army, has spent his entire football career at Army, coaching, I think, running backs and fullbacks. I think he coached offensive line. He's never coached tight ends. So I find that a little interesting. And he's also we know Mario Cristobal. He's a big-time recruiter. He wants his staff to be big-time recruiters. And recruiting at a service academy is very different than recruiting for the University of Miami. Right. I think Cristobal, I think he's earned benefit of the doubt enough to think that if he sees the ability in these guys, that you can trust him on it. And that if they interviewed well enough and have, whatever criteria he wanted, if they hit those marks, then okay. I think Cristobal's earned the benefit of the doubt in that regard. I just think they're very interesting hires and not quite what I would have expected. I don't know. I mean, look, Fabian Upshaw is going to have Mark Fletcher and Jordan Lyle and Gerard Pringle and Marty Brown. He's got a room to play with. And if, Fletcher rushes for 1,000 yards and they rush for, whatever the math is, Fletcher rushes for 1,000 and Lyle rushes for 500 and Pringle 400 and, whatever, then everyone's going to say, wow, Fabian Upshaw's a fantastic running backs coach. Okay, he's got a great room to play with. Good for him. Then Vitti, same thing. I mean, we'll see what happens with the tight ends this year, but he's got talent in Elijah Lofton and Luka Gilbert and the 2 4-star tight ends they brought in. So if the tight ends have a great year, then everyone's going to say, wow, Mike Vitti was a fantastic hire. And maybe he is. We just don't, it's hard to judge these hires, I guess, because they're not quite what I expected.
One thing I will say that, and this is old man, gray beard talk, having done this 30 years, the one thing I've heard over the decades is if you're going to bring in guys that are maybe elite recruiters or, really good at just impacting the team chemistry, tight ends coach, running backs coach are usually those spots where you would do that. And so maybe that's what Mario sees in the value in this. And certainly, I think he wants a level of toughness brought to the tight end position. And
Why would that
maybe
be?
you get that with Vidi, maybe a block punt
Yeah,
affected
maybe. Yeah.
Mario's thinking. He only spent what was it, half an hour on punt drills day one. Really intense training there. So yeah, and look, the other bit of news which I know was asked yesterday was the cornerbacks coach, right? Some news you want to cover that? What's going on there?
Sure. So yeah, right now, Terry Jefferson is working with the cornerbacks and leading that room. Miami has not made a hire yet to replace Zach Etheridge, who went to the NFL. So Terry Jefferson, who he was an analyst with Cristobal when Cristobal first got to UM. He had been at UM as like a recruiting staffer, and then as an analyst from I think up until 2020, up through 2022, I think. If I'm getting my years right. And then 2023 and 2024, he went to Jacksonville State. Was the cornerbacks coach there, and then came back to UM as like an assistant defensive backs coach.
Yeah.
So now that's still his title, as far as we know. He has not been elevated to, Zach Etheridge's former role. I asked him all about that. Like, just, is he going to be the guy? Is he like, how's that working? And he basically said like, yeah, Cristobal said that he had a lot of faith in Terry Jefferson and that he was a candidate for the open position. So, we'll see where they kind of go with that. Again, whether I think they like Terry Jefferson a lot. Whether they want to make him like the full-time cornerbacks coach, kind of up in the air.
The natural transition here would be go straight to the secondary, but I'm gonna move up to linebacker because I think that's probably the biggest question mark on defense, right? Especially when you have to replace a Wesley Besaint. Motori got his 8th year. He's back. You got Chase Smith, who played well down the stretch. Mario talked about that. I got a sound clip to play here. But I think this is, to me, when I look at this roster, that is my biggest concern. I think offensive line, they'll figure it out. They've got a mobile quarterback. They've got so many great weapons. It's going to be really hard to stop this offense. But I think we kind of took for granted all the plays that Wesley Besaint made for Miami this past season and just being able to help shut down the run. There were not a lot of huge runs. Yes, Kejuan Lacey broke that big one in the national semifinal, but overall, this defense was very, very good. Yes, Ruben Bain and Akeem Mesidor had a lot to do with that, but I thought Torre and Besaint were both solid, legitimate starters for a playoff team, and you're losing one of those guys. It's not easy to recruit the linebacker position and maintain the same level. We know Torre's injury history. How worried are you about linebacker? Do you think Chase Smith can put a healthy season together and be an impactful guy?
I would say I'm mildly concerned.
Okay.
Probably, and I'm most concerned about the position of all the position groups, but again, it's still only a mild concern. And the reason why, I don't think Motori had a great season, regular season. Mm-hmm. He was fantastic in the playoffs.
Correct.
He was huge for them in the playoffs. I mean, obviously the big play that stands out is the one against A&M on the last drive, like the penultimate play of the game. He was so good in the playoffs to the point where I am not concerned about him this season. I think he'll be a very solid linebacker for them again this year. As long as he can stay healthy, that's obviously the caveat with him having missed multiple years during his college career. That's the reason why he's, playing his A season. We get Mo Torre. Anyway, so yeah, then after him, like you said, replacing Wesley Besaint, that's a tough ask. I mean, Besaint, never a superstar, but always very solid for Miami throughout his career. And kind of who steps up to fill that role. I kind of assumed it would be, Popo, but Popo left via the portal. Yeah. So, now you look at, you have Chase Smith, who, like Torre, has been dogged by injuries throughout his career. You got Pruitt. Always been very interested by Bobby Pruitt. I like his ability potentially in like passing downs.
Yep.
I like his ability in those situations. I think we'll see more of him this year. And intrigued a lot by Kellen Wiley. He, didn't really play like 17 snaps, so barely played at all last year, but was, a highly regarded prospect. They got him at the buzzer, I think a year or two ago. So I'm intrigued by him. And yeah, like Kamal Bonner, they brought him via the portal. Didn't play a ton last year, but I think they might be a bigger opportunity for him this season. So there's not like an obvious, here's the next guy up. Maybe it's Wiley or someone, but there's not an obvious next linebacker up. But again, like the other positions, there's talent in that room. And it's a question of who, if anyone, is going to step up and take that next step and take over that role. It's just a question of kind of letting it play out and seeing who it's going to be.
All right, let's play some Mario audio on the linebackers because I did ask him about that. 1 second here.
I'll tell you, a guy that I don't think we spoke enough about was Chase Smith. Chase Smith, by the end of the year, was playing great, physical, tough, smart football. I mean, this is him and Mo have more experience than most NFL tandems, right? Those guys have been around a long time. But Chase Smith came back from an unbelievable, difficult knee injury, and I think he's been awesome. To hit on some of the other guys, then Bobby Pruitt, Kellen Wiley, those guys are off to a great start because they had a great offseason. KB, Bonner, EJ, Marshallin, I mean, it's probably as competitive as a wide receiver room. I think we've taken another step in terms of size, speed, physicality, but unproven, so to speak, after the first couple of guys. And just like every part of our team, we just have to get a hell of a lot better, I like to say this is a complete restart, a complete reboot, And our team knows that just because we got to the national title last year doesn't mean it just happens this year. Like, this is a complete, restart, day one culture, day one, early's on time, be out here early, get your stuff done, be a professional, eat, get your ankles taped, be in those meeting rooms early, ready to roll. And I think those guys, the older guys have done a nice job getting those guys in line so they can take a next step as a player.
I love the fact that Mario has sort of echoed, at least to me, a couple of times now in conversations that you don't just get back to the national championship game and you're starting over and this is a new team, etc. I think it's important for the fan base to really understand that. Now, I will say this, Adam, we were sitting there talking, you, me, and a couple of other sports writers. I think this is at least an 11-1 team just on paper. Right now, I can say I feel that way, and that's based on what I know is coming back from the ACC. I haven't done a whole lot of podcasts the last 2 months, but I've spent a whole lot of time breaking down every Power 4 roster in college football and what happened, the transfer portal and recruiting and everything else. So I feel like I've got a really good grasp on who's going to be good and who won't. And there's no reason Miami shouldn't be the clear front runner in the ACC just based on what they've got on paper.
Oh, I 100% agree. Clemson is not what Clemson once was. FSU is a shell of what FSU was even 3 years ago. The ACC is super weak. Miami's schedule is not crazy difficult. They only have one. Notre Dame is their toughest game by far. And yeah, there are some tougher teams, or there are some decent teams on that schedule. But like you said, there's no reason this team should not be right back where they were last year, at least in terms of the regular season, or better than they were in the regular season. Really, they should, like you said, 11-1 is more than attainable for them this year, and another playoff run is definitely attainable for them. But they have to work at it. Like Cristobal said in his audio, they can't just assume that, oh well, we're in the ACC. The ACC is kind of mid, and we're really good, so we'll just be back in the playoffs, and then we'll turn it on. We saw what happened last year. They were, really one CJ Daniels catch away from not making the playoffs at all. And not beating Notre Dame. They were 3 points away, one field goal away from not making the playoffs. They were right on the edge. And as much as I thought Miami deserved to be in the playoffs last year before they, got put in, that was only because of things happening around them. They did not seize their own playoff spot. They got lucky and they got help. So the fact that they can't rest on their laurels, I think that's something that needs to be hammered into the team. Should be hammered into the fan base. Needs to be hammered into really any fan base. No one's assured of a playoff spot, outside maybe Ohio State and Notre Dame, apparently, depending on their contract agreement with the playoff, but whatever. All is to say, they can't just, expect to coast through the year and make the playoffs and get back to the national title game just because they look really good on paper. There's a lot of work that goes into that the team last year, for their flaws and the good things about them, maybe the best thing about them was how gritty and tough they were. It was a team built in Mario Cristobal's image. And they can't, just because they might have maybe a little more flash in terms of Darian Mensah being a superstar, Malachi Toney being a superstar caliber player, they can't just expect to coast through the season and get to the national title game again.
I want to turn our attention to what I think is probably the team's strength, and that's the secondary in terms of just returning experience and guys that are legitimate playmakers. I think they recruited exceptionally. I've heard unbelievable things about J.J. Dunnigan, the freshman that arrived at safety. You obviously know what you have in Bryce Fitzgerald, who's just a ball hawk back there with 6 interceptions. But you return a bunch of corners with starting experience. You bring back one of your safeties in Zechariah Poyser. Yes, you're losing Agent Zero and Jacoby Thomas, two really good starters. But Adam, I think this could be the best secondary or one of the best secondaries in all of college football. And with an elite defensive line, I mean, this could be, a national championship winning defense.
Yeah, and that's part of the reason why I'm a little bit less concerned about the linebackers, because I think the first and third layers of this defense are fantastic. You start at the cornerbacks. I mean, Lucas, I think, it has a chance to be an all ACC corner. I think he's extremely talented. I mean, just watching, again, like I said earlier in the show, you can only get so much from watching 30 minutes of 45 minutes of one practice. You can't only glean so much from that. But I was really, really impressed. One of the things that stood out to me was Lucas I think he went up against Cooper Barkade on 3 reps that we saw, and he locked him down on 2 of them. Cooper Barkade, obviously 1,000-yard receiver, very talented guy, and Lucas just locked him down. He is really impressive. And I think he got better as the season went on last year. So you combine him, Ethan O'Connor, I think is a very, maybe not the superstar, flashy kind of corner, but I think he's very solid. Damari Brown, very solid, got that length, could play it outside or nickel back if they need him. Audrey Frederic, banged up last year, dealt with a lot of injuries, but, still, a freshman All-American kind of guy, like very solid. So you got 4 really, really good outside cornerback options in those guys. And then, nickelback, you got to replace Keontae Scott, whether it's with Omar Thornton, Bryce Fitzgerald, they have a lot of options to go at that position. And then safety, Poyser, Thornton, Fitzgerald. I've always been high on Dylan Day. I've always liked him. They've just got, and Dunnigan, who, like you said, everyone's been raving about so far. A lot of, good things coming out about him so far. I just think there's so much depth, so many options. Like, it's pick your poison. This should be a really, really, really good unit.
Yeah, and I think you got to give Corey Heatherman credit too with what he did with this group. Not only are they more talented, but they communicate so much better. They don't get lost when teams run motion. There were not many defensive breakdowns. And you think about the national championship game and the national semifinal, like you lost, what was it, Xavier Lucas, right, for a half against Indiana in the second half. I mean, you had injuries. You had guys banged up. Like they were down to like their 5th and 6th corners in those
Jabari Antoine was playing in the national in the semifinal.
Yeah, I mean he did good. He did well.
Yeah.
So and then every single recruit you bring in is a blue chipper, composite blue chip talent. I mean the things we were hearing yesterday from players. I mean Zechariah Poyser said that J.J. Dunnigan might be the fastest guy on the team, and this is a guy that's 6'2" plus with a huge body and just hitter. I mean he has all kinds of ability. So. I mean, this is an embarrassment of riches, really, and I'm very interested to see how this group evolves over the next couple of months. And a defense wins championships. You're elite at cornerback. You're elite at defensive tackle. I mean, you're going to win a lot of football games. And I think
compare it to 2 years ago when the cornerbacks were the liability. The reason they didn't make the playoffs was because they couldn't defend the pass.
Yeah.
And now you go from, like you said, you go from that to this being a strength of the team and maybe the best unit in the ACC, like massive. I mean, incredible work by like you said, Heatherman, Will Harris, Zach Etheridge last year. Like, I mean, you really can't say enough about it. Like, this unit should be fantastic.
Yeah, they went from I think 6th or 8th in the ACC in pass efficiency defense to 2nd. I think Louisville was the only team that was better, and that was because they had those 4 picks against Carson Beck. Probably
that helps.
Yeah, let's turn our attention to offense because obviously, the one area where Miami could legitimately be the best in the country is wide receiver, and you just look Malachi Toney now wearing the number 1 instead of the number 10 gives that one up to Darian Mensah. You mentioned Cooper Barkade earlier. Dre Jacobs, the transfer from South Carolina, I think had a big catch in day 1 from Mensah for a touchdown, and Cam Vaughn, a transfer from West Virginia who played at Jacksonville State with Zechariah Poyser. You've got 4 legitimate veteran guys. You got Josh Moore coming back for his 2nd season. Dalen Upshaw, another guy who Mario was super excited about. And then you got 4 terrific fresh. I mean, this is a room.
Yeah, like I was saying earlier. I mean, it's not just it's an incredibly talented room, and it's a versatile, diverse room. I mean, Toney obviously crazy, crazy good. Can't say enough positive things about him in the slot. Barkate, 1,000-yard receiver who's already got that chemistry with Mensa, having both come over from Duke. Cam Vaughn and Vandrevius Jacobs, both solid guys at their old schools. Jacobs, I think, has really good, deep ball ability. Moore, the funny thing is, last year, I picked Josh Moore to be the breakout freshman from the wide receiver room. Whoops. But
Yeah.
I'm holding on to that stock. I'm holding on to that stock because I think he is really talented. I think he's fast. He's tall. He's obviously raw coming in from West Broward, but the talent is definitely there. Upshaw, very solid. We saw some flashes from him last year. And then, like you said, the freshman, I think, Wingo, really talented dude. I think he'll get some. I think he definitely get some playing time this year. Paris, I'm so intrigued by his combination, like more of speed and size. He's 6'5", the tallest receiver in the room. Spafford, kind of maybe more of a slot receiver, so he's probably not going to see the field a ton behind Malachi Toney. And then Evans is, an intriguing guy, maybe more of a project kind of player, but he's got the height, so very. You really, again, like the cornerbacks, like a ton of depth, a ton of talent. It's everything you could want. Like, again, I'm shocked it took Miami as long to get a quarterback as it did in the portal, because I don't know who wouldn't want to play with these receivers.
Yeah, well, sometimes money talks, right? And that's all you needed to be put out there, is that you were spending big after you won all that money going through the college football playoff. I know my regular podcast listeners are probably flipping out. They're like, "What's wrong with Manny? He's way too positive. We're not getting enough negativity and balance here." I've been telling you guys for years, I always felt like Mario was the guy who was capable of recruiting Miami back to an elite status. It just takes time to do that. You need proof of concept. When you go to the national championship game, it's a lot easier to recruit, right? I mean, it just is. When you beat Notre Dame week 1 and you're high up in the rankings, right? And people are talking about you, and you have Cam Ward going number 1 in the draft. It all goes hand in hand, man. Like, that's how you build a winner. It's not just winning, against FSU and Florida. It's proof of concept. It's getting somewhere, and that's why Miami is where they are. Now, this isn't. Go ahead.
One thing on that note, I don't remember where I saw it. It might have been on Twitter or a fan or a reporter. I don't remember who said it, but one thing that, having covered recruiting down here for a while, primarily during Miami's downturn, the same thing you heard from like local recruits about Miami was, I want to see them do this. I want to see them get better on offense or do better on defense or play better or whatever. You're not hearing that anymore because people have seen it. Like,
Right.
Recruits are happy to have seen it. And that's how you start building that momentum. I think if we're going to talk recruiting later, guys like Nick Lanier and all, these high-end prospects, now, like you said, they've seen that proof of concept. They see what Mario Cristobal and this staff can do with high-end talent, and they want to be a part of it because they see how fun it. I mean, for South Florida guys especially, how cool it is when the Hurricanes are good.
Yep.
So we're not seeing so much of the I want to see from recruits. It's the I saw from recruits.
Yep, 100%. Here's an interesting dilemma. Miami has gone to the transfer portal now 3 years in a row to get a quarterback. They've recruited the quarterback position pretty well, right? I think Luke Nickel, certainly Darian Coleman, I heard was ripping it yesterday on day one, and people were impressed with his arm strength. I knew he was a guy who had sort of the Cam Ward arm, having watched him a couple years ago in person. There is a sort of topic that nobody really ever wants to talk about in terms of Miami, and that's, well, what do you do with high school recruiting, right? Are you just going to go into the portal every single year? Can you find a Darian Mensah? Can you find a Carson Beck? Can you find a Cam Ward year in and year out? I'm going to put you on the spot, Adam. Does Miami finally just next year decide we're going with Luke Nickel or Darian Coleman?
I lean yes, but it might depend on who's in the portal.
Right.
If there's a star quarterback who wants to come in Miami and who's affordable, who's in the portal, you can't say no. Not when you want to be competing every year. You can't say no. If, again, the equivalent of a Cam Ward or a Darian Mensah is in the portal and they want to come to Miami, they're interested, and you can pay them, you have to. Because the difference between a average quarterback and a superstar quarterback is I mean, it's night and day. Difference between going 9-3 or 8-4 and playing in the title game. If you can get a superstar, you play the superstar. You get the superstar. With that being said, I don't think there would be that kind of trepidation like there would have been a year ago if they hadn't gotten Cam Ward, because I like Emory Williams, the person. I don't think he's a great quarterback. We'll see how he does at ECU. I didn't really like what we saw. Obviously, the bowl game was one thing, but like he never blew me away in practice or in the spring games or anything. Again, all good luck to him at ECU. I hope he does well. But if this happened if they decided to go with who they had a year ago, you'd be talking Emory Williams or Judd Anderson. And I think that's a different conversation than Luke Nickel or Darion Coleman or Judd Anderson. But let's be real. Again, no offense to him, but like I think it'll come down to Nickel and Coleman. And I think that's a different level of ability. And, Luke Nickel at that point will have had 3 years or be going into his third year in the system. Coleman going into his second year in the system. Both of them are blue chip guys. I think both of them have a lot of ability. I have always liked Luke Nickel from watching him in high school. I think he's got that kind of that. In addition to talent, he's got that kind of gritty, kind of lunch pail style thing. I know that's kind of a trope, but I think he's got it. Coleman, I love what I saw from Coleman. For a lot of what I saw when he played in the state title game last year down in Miami. He has the ability to make plays. He can make plays out of nothing. He's got the arm talent. So a really capable guy. I think that's just a different level than what they had in the room, homegrown guys a year ago. So if there's a superstar, you go get him and just say, better luck next year or hit the portal to Nickel and Coleman if you have to. But I don't think there's a problem with going with a Nickel Coleman battle a year from now.
Yeah, I think a lot of Miami fans were hopeful that, that maybe one of those guys would be ready to go as true freshmen. And I agree with you. I think you had to go out into the portal. But I think if you do it again a fourth year in a row, you might really hurt your high school quarterback recruiting in the future. Like people, they're going to say, hey, these guys only take transfers, and so I don't know how that sets you back over time. I guess if you're winning national championships, what do you care, right? You can just say we're going to go out and get the best guy every fall, but that's not easy to do.
Yeah, I think ultimately if you're Mario Cristobal, you're Shannon Dawson, and you do that 3-4 years in a row, you have to tell the high school quarterbacks, listen, the guys we have in the room, we didn't think we're good enough. If you're good enough, you'll play.
Right.
I think that's kind of what you have to tell them, and like it's not a question of we're going to only play transfers or only play homegrown guys. It's a question of we're going to play the best guy we can have. And if you're the best guy we can have, we'll play you. And if you're a confident, cocky, 4-star, 5-star quarterback coming out of high school and you think I can come in and compete and win the job, then maybe that's not such a detriment to you. But if I don't want to, talk bad about any high school recruit or anything, but if you're not confident in your abilities, then you might be scared away from that. And at that point, do you really want that guy as your quarterback anyway?
Right. Correct. You don't want anybody running from competition. Running back looks awfully familiar. Obviously, Javian Mallory, the freshman edition. Jordan Lyle stuck around. And there's a reporter who's covered this team for a long time with me from another outlet who thinks that Jordan Lyle's going to potentially take over as the number one running back this fall. He will remain nameless. But Mark Fletcher is back. Mark Fletcher ran for over 1,000 yards. Marty Brown was spectacular in his role. Gerard Pringle was spectacular in his role. Does Miami have room for 4 running backs in their rotation? Adam Lichtenstein.
If you're going to play 16 games, then you really could use 4 running backs in that group. And I overheard part of that conversation. And the person brought up a good point that Jordan Lyle started the season opener last year.
Mm-hmm.
Like they think very highly of Jordan Lyle. Banged up by injuries and whatever last year, never really got going. Never saw that kind of spark and athleticism we saw as a freshman. But if he's healthy this year, I think he's an incredibly talented running back. I think him and Fletcher can be the 4 of them really are a great tandem or a great quad. What's the word for 4? Not trio or duo. Foursome, whatever. Look, they have some different skill sets. Fletcher and Brown are obviously huge. and can just run people over. Pringle is very fast. Lyle's got kind of a blend of the two of them. He's big, but he's also pretty fast. I don't really know what else we could ask for. Again, it's a great group. Fletcher, great kid. Have loved covering him since high school. Seeing him roll through the postseason was really incredible. Because if you
Most
remember,
yards by any running back.
yeah, if you remember entering the playoffs, he had been banged up, and then he had a couple games where they didn't play him a ton. I think he had 30 yards against maybe Virginia Tech or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
He wasn't playing a ton. They were relying a lot on Pringle, and then he goes into the playoffs and just runs people over. And it's funny because I asked him about kind of like that, like we talked about earlier, the kind of lower workload in conditioning and stuff. And he goes, "Yeah, I felt fine." He goes, "After the playoffs, I felt fine." He's like, "I felt great." And I'm like, "How?" Because you were running the ball 25 times a game and running people over. He's built different. I've always liked him because he may not be the fastest, but he's got speed, and he's built like a linebacker. And I guess that helped him, stay healthy through that. And yeah, like you said, Lyle stayed, Pringle stayed despite entering the portal for about 24 hours. Who can forget that? So it's just such a, again, like a lot of the other rooms we've been talking about, there's really nothing to nitpick or criticize. It's a great room. There's a ton of talent in there.
Well, we're going to one room here that is, I think, interesting, the last room, and that is the tight end room, where you've got Elijah Lofton coming off of, I think, some great flashes last season, right, as a sophomore. But the rest of the room, question marks. And I added Cole McConaughey there, the former defensive end who played 9 snaps last season on defense. I don't know if that's just a cup of coffee he's having at that position and potentially could move back to defensive end in the fall. We've seen that happen over the years at the University of Miami. But the interesting guys are the 2 freshmen, Gavin Mueller, who was a player Miami stole away from Colorado, and then Israel Briggs, who is a lot like Lofton, right? An oversized wide receiver. So many people have talked about Shannon Dawson and the use of the tight end in this offense. When he had an NFL caliber guy in Elijah Arroyo, they used the tight end. Is there an NFL caliber guy in your mind at this position?
I don't know. Lofton has gotten a ton of hype over his first 2 years, a lot of attention from coaches, a lot of praise, and we haven't fully seen it
right
on the field yet. He's, like you said, he's had good moments. He's had some rough moments too. I remember, I think he dropped a touchdown, maybe against Virginia Tech, or maybe that was Alex Bellman. I think Lofton had one play. I think he had one drop touchdown. Maybe it was Pitt. I don't remember, but he's been good in flashes and rough in others. I would love to see him come into his own and really use that talent, because I think he can be a very versatile player and a weapon on that offense if he comes into his own. I just don't think that's a lock. Luka Gilbert, very interesting. I will say in a CFB 26 dynasty of mine, he became a star. So take that for what it's worth, which is obviously a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Which I will say also, same thing. Darian Mensah also became a superstar for Miami when I played with Tulane. Anyway, not important. But I think Gilbert could be an interesting player. Just we didn't see a lot from him last year. And then Muller and Briggs. I mean, we'll see what they bring. Like you said, 4-star guys. Muller, I think, was very versatile in high school. I think he scored 30 touchdowns across 5 different positions, like tight end, quarterback, running back, and receiver or whatever. So I'm just intrigued by what they could bring to the room. We were talking about earlier with linebackers and the offensive line. There's talent in the room. It's just a question of who kind of emerges.
Right. I'm very interested to see. This one is a big question mark for me. Lofton, I think, has a role. Certainly, you can have him catch passes out of the backfield and line him up in different slots, and he'll make plays for you. I just don't know that he is a bona fide, big enough traditional tight end that is an NFL guy, right? Because of his size, and so that's that's a big question mark for me. I'm very interested to see which young guys. Does Gilbert take the step? Does Mueller or Briggs come in and make a huge impact right away? They're bigger body guys in terms of Mueller and Gilbert, but very interesting position. All right, we spent an hour here breaking down the team. We still have recruiting and a mailbag to get to, Adam. So I don't want to hold you hostage much longer. We will get to recruiting here quickly with one of these screenshots that I've got here, and this is the 247 commitment list for Miami. Couple commitments. The last what is it? How many commitments did they get yesterday? 2.
2. Yeah, so you're missing one right there.
Okay, so this is an old commitment list, but
Outdated as of 7 p.m. yesterday.
Okay, I apologize. So it's 7 commitments as part of this class, but Nick Lanier is obviously the big one in terms of the overall, 5-star, certainly one of the best players in Miami's backyard, former Northwestern Bull. That was a big one over the offseason. But what do you think of this group so far? We kind of talked about this subject a little while ago in terms of when you've got proof of concept, you can start to keep some of these elite players home. Who else do you identify as guys that Miami has to maybe get in this class?
Well, I mean, I'll start off with Lanier. Obviously, he's a star. I saw him play in the state title game for Northwestern last year. He had really, I mean, a wild sequence of maybe 10 minutes at the end of the game where he caught what looked like would be the game-winning touchdown pass from Neiman Lawrence, another Miami target. And then a few minutes later, playing on the other side of the ball, playing cornerback, missed a tackle for what ended up being the game-winning touchdown for, I think, Jacksonville Reigns High, which is just a brutal sequence of events. But I watched him throughout that game. He's one of the guys I had an eye on, and he's a great player. A guy who, if you're Miami, he's in your backyard, one of the guys you really need to lock down. So I love that they were able to get him in the class early. I think that's big. It sends a sign for other guys in this class to, that there are stars on board with Miami now. As far as guys they need to get, I don't know if we're necessarily at the point yet. We will be in a couple months when we get into like the summer OV season. I think Miami has a lot of options, a lot of talented guys who are interested and who are visiting throughout spring and summer. So I don't know if there's like a bunch of must-get guys. There's a lot of options, a lot of talent, a lot of different ways I could go. But if I had to pick one, I'd probably go with Mark Matthews out of St. Thomas Aquinas, the 5-star offensive tackle, who has said a lot of good things about Miami. He's clearly very interested. Again, another guy who's right in Miami's backyard. And, it's just he'd be another guy you can stack talent with. The more talent you have in a room, the better it is. Like we've been raving about all the depth they have at all these positions. And if you can get a Mark Matthews and that's another 5-star tackle you can bring in and, potentially in a year, pair him with Jackson, second-year Jackson Cantwell, then you're off to a great start for your offensive line for 2027 and 2028. So if there is a must-get guy, I think it's probably Matthews, but I think we're still early enough in the cycle that, like, if they miss out on a guy they want, there are still other guys they can go to.
All right. I want us to get to the mailbag, but there were 2 commitments yesterday. Sherrod Gordine, I guess, is the other, the Hollywood MacArthur defensive back.
Yep.
Anything you can say on him? I'm looking at height weight here, 5'10", 177 pounds. And they also obviously picked up the kid from Key West, Josh Johnson, the defensive lineman.
Yeah, just a quick thing on Josh Johnson I thought was funny was on Blue Sky, I tweeted out that they got that commitment, and somebody said they should get him like a buoy that says Southernmost Recruit, and I'm like, I love that.
That is pretty cool.
Yeah. I don't know a ton about Gordine. I do want to get out to their spring ball, later in like April and May, because now MacArthur's going to have 2 UM commits in Jones and Gordine. Mm-hmm. I know they like him as a nickel, and they evaluated him pretty highly. 3-star guy, so he's not like a superstar recruit or anything, but I think they like what they've seen from him. He's like they had a trend kind of through Miami did of evaluating guys a lot on their senior year. So if he has a strong senior year, then they might have snagged kind of a diamond in the rough. But I just think they like him a lot. I need to learn more about him and really a lot of the other in the class as they enter their senior year. But I think he's definitely got talent. They like him at nickel. And we'll kind of see how he does and progresses throughout the senior year.
Yep. It'll be interesting to watch. Long way away. Obviously, a lot of visitors. I know that the Recruit Nicks love to talk about that stuff. For me, I always love to just get to it in December, right? See who's sticking in and who isn't.
Yeah.
All right, let's get to the mailbag. We got just a handful of questions here, not many. People are on spring break themselves, I guess. I don't know how else to describe it. Let's Let's start it off here with the first one. This one's from Asher Wildman. Happy offseason, Manny. Over the years, you've always used a very well-graded eye test. How does the look of the team in terms of size and speed compare to the end of the Diaz and Richt eras? All the haters understand now why Cristobal did what he did. And are you at all concerned about the offensive line? You saw them. You answer the first part of this question.
Yeah, I mean, they look good. I mean, like, they've got size, they've got speed. Again, I can't really think of a position where I was like, that doesn't look right, or that doesn't, they look good. They look better than they did a couple of years ago. I could definitely say that. I can't really say for, the Richt era or the Diaz era because I wasn't covering the team yet, but just comparing them to year one under Cristobal, they look much better. I think they have the look of a good team.
Yeah, everybody who I spoke to who was at practice yesterday that has been around this program for a long time in South Florida knows the change physically that has happened under Mario Cristobal. All were raving about the talent and size and speed of this team. So don't take my word for it. We only get to watch usually, 15 minutes of stretching whenever we're out there. Yesterday, I know it was 7 periods.
We got about 40 minutes yesterday. We got to watch 7 periods.
Yeah, yesterday was a bonus, and usually the start of spring is when they do open it up the most. But I can tell you, I love listening to the people who get to watch the whole practice and people that I trust that I know have done it for years. And I'm telling you, they're raving about this roster. Sam Knowlton says, Mario's been at events this offseason making jokes and actually smiling and enjoying life like a real human person. Is that what he's actually like off camera, or is he just finally winning at the rate he expected to a while ago? Well, somebody in the media did bring up the question about his exchange with Kirby Smart, Georgia's coach. I don't know if you saw, I'm sure you saw the video, Adam, but I don't know if our listeners all saw the video. There was a Freshman of the Year event. Obviously, Malachi, Tony, and Mario were there. It was at Steve Spurrier up in Gainesville, his award ceremony. And Kirby Smart grabbed the mic, kind of went after Mario in Miami a little bit. They are former, I want to call them teammates on the same coaching staff at Alabama under Nick Saban, so there is a relationship there. Mario obviously hilariously went back. I thought Mario was fantastic. I thought that it was one of the funniest things I've ever seen. The question here is Mario really like this? Yes, when the cameras are not around, Mario is very playful in terms of joking, especially with people that he knows for a long time. Is he any more loose because they're winning? Yeah, I think so too. I think that is part of this. There is a sense of accomplishment. Agree or disagree, Adam?
I agree. First, an analogy or a comparison. When I was in college at UF, hold your booze, I covered the softball team. And the softball team was coached by a guy named Tim Walton, and great coach. And when I covered him, he was wound so tight. Sense it. He'd snap at people. Like, I remember, I think like an SID dropped some papers and he got all pissy about it. Like, just very wound very tight. They were very good that year, but they lost in the Women's College World Series. The following year, they won the Women's College World Series. And speaking to other writers who covered that team, when they won, he opened up, and he was much looser. And I think we underestimate the pressure that a lot of these coaches are under because, look, that's what the money's for. They live a good life, whatever. That's what they get paid to do. But there's a lot of pressure on these guys. And I do think that, one, I can definitely say, just from personal experience, when the cameras aren't on, Mario takes off his media face and he can be very funny, very personable. And you could see that. I mean, look at his recruiting. You can't recruit guys if you're not personable.
Right.
And he's definitely got that. That's part of him. I mean, I wouldn't say I know him well enough to say that's who he is, and he puts on a face for us. But he can be a very very jovial person. And maybe he's letting a little bit more of that come through in more public settings. If so, great, because I don't need somebody to be Steve Spurrier and let off amazing one-liners, but I want the coaches and players I cover to be people. Be yourself. And if he lets a little bit more of that through, then fantastic.
Mario certainly has that part of his personality that's real, and there's nothing fake or phony about it. I never feel that way around him, that he's being phony. I think sometimes when bad things happen, right? And he went through some tough learning lessons his first 2 seasons. Certainly still evolving as a coach, right? I think he loosened up more as this season went on, and it's a big reason why the team made it to the national championship. But I don't ever get the sense that Mario is fake. Like it's always you're getting the real Mario, and when they lose a game or they struggle or they don't play well, he's always criticizing himself. He's criticizing the staff. He's criticizing the players. He's in his own way, right? And then the face he puts on in camera in front of everybody else is this is the way it's supposed to look, right?
Yeah,
And so
when I say he's got a media face, I don't mean that in that he's fake. I mean he's being
right.
Mario Cristobal, head football coach of the Miami Hurricanes, because
Right.
that's who he needs to be in front of the camera. He's not Steve Spurrier. He's not calling FSU Free Shoes University on the camera.
No, but that was hysterical. And if you get a chance to watch that video of him and Kirby Smart going at each other, it's worth the time. Last question here in the mailbag. This is from JBoy1724. Javi, is Carlos Ledo joining, or is he swimming in taxes right now? Well, you look at the calendar. It's not April 15th yet. So Carlos is still very, very busy for those of you who miss Carlos. Mario mentioned that he feels the linebacker room is just as deep as the receiver room. Do you think that's just for hyping up the young guys at linebacker, or is it a legitimate fact? What would cause this team to underachieve this year? I think when Mario answered my question about linebackers, he was talking about the body types, that they're finally looking like physically the way they need to at that position. And that's true. There are a lot of 6'4", 230 guys in that group now. I don't think they're very undersized. Agree or disagree on that front?
Oh, I agree. And I think when he compared them to the receivers, I don't know if he necessarily, at least I didn't really take it in terms of they're as well, you definitely said they're not as proven as a receiver, right, but that there's competition
right
at like there's at wide receiver.
Right. Those are the two positions where you could see a surprise, maybe, of somebody playing more than you expected. I think everywhere else you're kind of pretty much you're thinking along the lines of veterans will be at those spots. And then as far as this last question from Javi B here, what would cause this team to underachieve this year? Same thing that causes a lot of great teams to underachieve. We talked about it at the very top of the show, injuries. I think you lose some key players at certain spots, certainly the offensive line. You lose, Malachi Toney, or you lose a quarterback in Darian Mensah for an extended period of time. That's what puts you in the crosshairs for trouble.
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to think, like, besides injuries, because it's obvious. Like, if Mensah gets hurt,
right,
that's a major problem. If Malachi Toney gets hurt, that's a big problem. I'm trying to think what could cause this team, short of injuries, that would make them underachieve. I think if I had to pick something out, it would probably be the offensive line not coming together like I think we all expect it to. Mm-hmm. If that unit doesn't gel, if guys underachieve there and aren't the level that they are expected to be, then that could go from the team's biggest strength last year, arguably their biggest strength, to a weakness. Again, I don't think that's going to happen. I'm pretty confident they'll have a good offensive line, if not as good as last year, then at least pretty solid. But if that's what happens, well, if you have then you have Darian Mensah scrambling a bunch, and he can do that, but doesn't necessarily want to do that. Probably not. Then you have you need guys like in the receiver group to make plays, which they can do, but it's not what you're aiming for. So I think that would be my number one concern, or what my number one thing that I would peg is what could make the team underachieve, even if I don't think it's going to happen.
Right. I would think just that would be an obvious one, right? The offensive line is really bad. Everywhere else, I expect them to be really good, though. That's the problem. I think even with a mediocre offensive line, they could still win 11 games.
Of course, yeah, exactly. Yeah, they're good enough all around that, like, it would take a lot of things to go wrong for this team to only end up like 8-4.
Right. A lot. I mean, a lot of things to go wrong. All right, Adam, I appreciate you coming on. Make sure you check out all of Adam's work at the Sun-Sentinel. Follow him on Twitter as well. Anything we can promote for you here, Adam? Anything we can tease in terms of coming out this spring?
Yeah, just, I mean, I'm gonna be at basically every spring practice, barring unforeseen circumstances. But so just, day to day, follow my work at sunsentinel.com. Subscribe. It's like $1 or $2 like a year. So just do that, please. Keep me employed. But yeah, I'll be at camp basically every day.
He will be at camp every day. I will not. I've got my own set of jobs to do here for the Athletic. I will be back with another podcast before the end of the spring. I don't know when. I will probably bring Adam back on because we love having Adam on, number one. And number two, our boy is deep into tax season. So I know you want your Carlos Ledo jokes. I know you guys love when he's, talking about movies and all kinds of off-the-field shenanigans.
Go see
But
Project Hail Mary. I can talk about movies. Go see
there you
Project
go.
Hail Mary.
I want to check that one out. Is it worth the price of admission?
Yes, I read the whole book. I was on vacation last week. I read the whole book in 24 hours. It's 500 pages, and I knocked it out because I couldn't put it down. And the movie's phenomenal. And if you're in South Florida, you can go see it in 70 millimeter IMAX at the Fort Lauderdale Science Museum, which I'm doing this weekend.
Awesome. Well, I definitely want to check it out. If I'm not at pickleball or soccer here in the next 6 weeks, I will try to squeeze in some time to go watch a movie. But I think I'm going to be busy with that and transfer portal evaluations and off-season questions for a bunch of Power 4 teams, not just Miami. So I will keep myself busy with that. Make sure you read Adam, though. And thanks for tuning into the Wide Right Podcast. We will be back with more show. I promise. It won't be 2 months again. But I don't know exactly when we'll be back. See you guys later.